Hi, everyone. Welcome to A Word with Kellie Scott Reed. We're here with Jarrod Campbell today, a writer just outside of Washington, D.C. Hi, welcome.
Thank you very much. It's good to be here.
Well, we're very happy to have you. You have been published in the Rough Press. One of the stories that I absolutely loved and edited, thought it was wonderful. So everybody can check him out there. I will have to post underneath what we're posting here on YouTube exactly what version you're in, so they can go into the archive and
Sure.
check it out. I think that would be wonderful. I thank you for joining us. We were having a conversation before the camera turned on, and one of the part of that conversation was, before I even get into the questions, which how Jarrod writes a really great sentence, and how important that is for me when I'm reading, to be captivated by the sentences. It can be a simple sentence. It doesn't have to be fancy. Is there a method when you write? Do you write a sentence for impact?
Yes, I mean, a lot of times I feel sentences just I try to use to kind of move the story along, just to kind of, from get to point A to point B. But a lot of times, yes, I do want to kind of make an impactful sentence or write an impactful sentence just to kind of give it a little bit of a punch, just to, again, keep somebody interested. I like to read a lot of early 1900s French literature, like Marcel Proust, Genet, stuff like that. And of course, they're known for these amazingly long, beautiful sentences. So not that I'm trying to write a paragraph long sentence like Proust or anything, but that's just, I like how you can get a lot out of a small sentence, or you can get a lot out of a long sentence, and I just try to, I don't know, I try to find a middle ground between that and just, I don't know. Yeah, I like to have a punch occasionally. Yes, certainly. So.
And when you're writing, from what I've noticed, from reading the work that you submitted to the press, I noticed that you there's an element in the story of urgency,
Yes.
a little bit dangerous, but also a little romantic. It's all kind of interwound into the story, which I really love. Do you intentionally set out to write that way, or is it something that just kind of comes out?
I think more of the latter, honestly. I would like to say that yes, I set out to write these amazingly well-crafted sentences, but no, I think a lot of times, again, it's just I'm trying to get the stuff out as it's coming up in my head. So a lot of that kind of comes out in the editing. I write a lot of very short sentences, but then in the editing process, I try to plump them up a little bit to give them that sense of urgency, or to kind of help with the mood or the tone of the story, certainly.
Could you describe a time in your life when you realized that like language had power for you?
Yes, honestly. It was when I was in high school, actually. I had an amazing English teacher. It was a humanities slash literature teacher. And it was when I read The Stranger by Camus. That was just the very short, clipped kind of sentences, it just the way there's so much power in those sentences or there can be, that was pretty much one of the first instances where it really had an impact on me. Just the opening paragraph alone, like "Mama died today," period, or was it yesterday, period. I mean, that whole paragraph. It's just I'd never read anything like that up to that point, and it really hit me. It really hit me. So yeah, I would say it probably started there. So.
Yeah, I remember there are certain books that appear in a writer's memory that I've seemed to
Mhm.
find, The Stranger being one. There's a lot of different, The Lottery, Shirley Jackson, that
Oh
short
yeah.
story, that really kind of shock people almost into awareness
Mhm.
about writing, and and where you can take it. That it's almost like it's like I've never heard something like this before, and
Right.
it can be done, and it's out there, and I can
Mhm.
create it.
Right.
What do you feel the elements of good writing are?
Elements of good writing. It really depends on, I think, what you want from whatever it is that you're reading. Honestly, like I like to read fiction, nonfiction. Sometimes I want to just be entertained, and I want just a really good story. So just tell me a good story. I'm okay with that if that's the headspace I'm in. Other times I want to think outside of my box and kind of learn something about a different culture, be it through fiction or nonfiction, and that's what I would like to get. So I can get, yeah. I'm kind of getting stumbled up here actually. That's pretty much it. Just depends on what I'm seeking, I guess, out of the material I'm reading. So just entertain me or make me think, really, or both. I guess that's, good too.
Is there one book in particular that later on in life, it's hard to continually be surprised
Mhm.
and continually be enter into that space of kind of, as what do they say? Think of everything as a beginner,
Right.
with a beginner's mind. Is there anything that you've read recently that put you in that space?
I would say yes. By recently, I would say within the last like 3 years or so, not within the last, that's about as recent as I'm going to go. I read, I'm a huge Yukio Mishima fan, and I read a book of his called Forbidden Colors, which I'm not sure if you guys are familiar with that one or not, but it's an amazing, amazing story about this, in a nutshell. Basically, it's this older man who all of his life he's felt kind of jilted by women, so he decides he wants to take revenge. So he decides to incorporate this very young gay man who's like beautiful to everybody. So all of these women start falling in love with him, and of course he ends up breaking their heart. That's how he ends up exacting his revenge. There's more to it than that, but it's the way he writes. He goes on these like wonderful like expositions of beauty that are just fantastic. But the thing that really kind of struck me the most, to answer your question about that book, was it was interesting for me to see, and I do tend to read a lot of gay literature as well, but it was interesting for me to see that a book written in the 50s about gay life in Tokyo, Japan, really wasn't much different, say, from me growing up in like the late 80s, early 90s, as a young gay kid. Just the parallels, that was very shocking to me. It was very neat to see that. And just, I mean, obviously there are differences, but overall, a lot of similarities.
Interesting. Have you heard of Ocean Vuong?
Yes, I'm a huge, huge fan. Huge fan. Yes, yes, yes. I have all of his
books. That is what did it for me. I haven't read anything like that in a long time. Fantastic. Right.
Yeah.
Fantastic work. And you were just reminding me when you were saying that storyline. Obviously, it's different. Ocean Vuong writes a lot about his actual experience. It's
sure,
but fantastic, really incredible, and kind of blew the doors off of a lot of what I previously came in with, experience with writing and reading that I came in with.
Yeah, that novel was astonishing. And I've read the 2 poetry books as well, but oh man, On Earth We're Briefly Gorgeous was just, so good. So good.
He was on, I'm thinking he was on an interview with Terry Gross on NPR, and also on Being, which is another one about spirituality. I would listen to him. He speaks as gorgeously as he writes.
Yes, there recently, when he was doing a tour for his most recent book, I have it over here. Yeah, Time as a Mother. He came to Sixth and I, which is a synagogue that hosts a lot of literary events in Washington, D.C. I wasn't able to attend in person, but I got tickets for the virtual event, so I was able to watch that, and that was fascinating just to hear him talk and read from his book. It was a wonderful evening. So even cool. From home. Yeah.
Does writing energize or exhaust you?
It honestly, it energizes me. I have a lot of writer friends that we discuss this a lot. And even when I'm exhausted or tired and I'm just like, I'll just sit down and I'm sure I'll maybe just get a sentence or two, nothing great, but then so much will come out. So no, I find it certainly more energizing. When I'm done, I'm exhausted naturally, but in the process, it's very invigorating to me, because I like to see where things go, basically.
Did you, when you do write in like little chunks, like little spurts, or do you have like set aside time?
I tend to have a set aside time. I have a day job as well, a Monday through Friday normal, day job. So I like that because it's numbers during the day, it's accounting work. And then in the evening, that's when I deal with words. So I truly appreciate that balance. But in the evenings and then on the weekends, that's usually my set aside time. So.
Very cool. Now, what made you start writing in the first place? What was the catalyst that got you in this direction?
I think just the ability to tell stories. I come from a very artistic family. Everybody on my mom's side of the family is musicians. I'm a classically trained pianist as well. I haven't played in a while, but like we're all mostly musical. And I always appreciated that growing up as well. But then even when I was much younger, I still always wrote poems. And when I was into music, of course, I would write more like songwritery things. So I would write lyrics, as well. So, I mean, writing has just always kind of kind of been there for me. I like the, trying to, especially in songwriting, I like trying to tell a really good story in just a short amount of time, which I think is why I'm, enjoying writing short stories so much. It's just kind of an expansion of that, is how I see it. But
yeah, is there any musician that whose writing style that you really appreciate?
as far as like lyrics, that sort of thing,
Yeah.
I'm a huge Tom Waits fan. That man's, I could listen to him all day long. Just, I mean, the poetry is fantastic. My introduction to him, my mom is a huge Bette Midler fan, and she covered, of course, a few of his songs. So that's how I was introduced to his, because I just remembered it. There's a song that she covers of his called "Shiver Me Timbers," and I just remembered as a kid, really those lyrics really affecting me. I was like, that's a really interesting, because it was above and beyond your normal, kind of song that you would hear. It was just sounded like there was something else going on with those lyrics. So that's when I, figured out who wrote the songs, and then I started, digging in and finding out more about his music. So I'm a huge Tom Waits fan. Leonard Cohen, of course, is just, I mean, astonishing, obviously, and Bob Dylan, naturally. My mom was a hippie, went to Woodstock, so I grew up on Simon and Garfunkel and Joni Mitchell, so people like that, honestly, yes, I really, really good lyrics. So.
That's awesome. I was, when you were talking about Tom Waits, my son, when he was like 10, used to do a Tom Waits impression. He would sing, "The piano has been drinking." He thought it was the funniest thing he'd ever. So he still does that once in a while, just come in and sing it. He's old now, but he loves Tom Waits. And I can't remember if it was in terms of lyrics. I was always surprised by Bob Dylan. Mm-hmm. Because I sometimes I won't know a song is by Bob Dylan, and then I will hear someone else do it, and I'll be like, "It's the most amazing thing in the world." And then you hear it, I hear it so clear. I can't remember what the song was. Well, Redemption Song, I think, by Bob Marley. I'm not sure if this is true or if it was just an urban legend. I can't tell you for sure, but I had heard that Bob Dylan wrote Redemption Song for Bob Marley. I had heard, and it's like, it's a transcendent song. It's really fantastic. I love that stuff. And who are your literary heroes?
That could be here all day talking about that. Obviously, like I said, Yukio Mishima, huge fan of his. I'm a huge Gore Vidal fan. He was just a flinty man. He was just, wow. But he could make a point, though. That's what I appreciated about him. I love a writer named Andrew Holleran. He's a fantastic gay writer. He wrote one of his more famous books is Dancer from the Dance. He was involved in the Violet Quill group of writers with like Edmund White, Felice Picano, that group. Wow. I'm a huge Joan Didion fan, actually. I'm reading one of her novels now. I've read two of her other novels. I'm more familiar with her fiction than her nonfiction. I own it all. It's just a matter of getting to it, obviously. But also James Baldwin, huge James Baldwin fan. So I could go on and on, but I'll pause there. So.
No, those are all legends, honestly. I mean, Joan Didion, I think I didn't really read her until her book, The Year of Magical Thinking. Mm-hmm. That was the first time I read her. How that happened is beyond me. I think my friend's husband had passed away. Okay. Very suddenly. So I picked that book up and said, let me read this. I heard, she had this very horrible experience.
Yes.
It was incredible. And I went, okay, now it's time to go backwards. And I started reading some of her nonfiction, which is insanely great. And so, yeah. And then I watched her documentary fairly recently, which was heartbreaking.
Yes. And that was my introduction. I of course heard of her, but I was at a writers conference down in New Orleans, and that documentary had just come out and people were talking about it. I was like, well, that's what I'm doing when I get home. So, and wow. Yeah, exactly. It was such everything that woman went through and witnessed was just astonishing. But that's when I started reading her book. So you at least started before me. I was way later to the game, I promise.
Better late than never, right?
That is true. Especially with Joan Didion. That is true.
So cool. I was trying to think of another writer that, never mind. I'm too old. Everything comes in and out of my head so instantly. You'll say something, I will think it, I'll go, yes, and then I'll try to find it and it's walked out the door.
That's my experience.
So what are you working on? Is there anything that you're working on, or a place we can get a
Yes.
hold of you and see your stuff?
Yes, so I do have a website, and I only usually update that when something is either published or I'm terrible at blogging. I don't have the time to do all of that. I wished I did. It's just I would rather use that time to work on, what I'm working on, honestly. So, but I do post stuff there. There are stories. There are links, of course, to the story that you all published. So yeah, it's just jarrodcampbellauthor.com, pretty basic. But what I'm working on now, a couple of things. Again, I mentioned Camus earlier. I've always been a huge fan of his, and of course, Sartre, but I always, for some reason, was, again, very late to the game with Simone de Beauvoir. So lately, I've been like really trying to get into her because she's always just been this fascinating, figure that, I just never, unfortunately, read. So, but I read about her, just never read her work. So she has this book called The Woman Destroyed. It's basically three stories that are just about how, like women have been treated, situations, that show just, how horribly basically women are treated, hence the title of the book, rather. So I thought that's an interesting idea. I'd like to write something kind of, I guess, gay about that, or, in that vein. So I'm working on three kind of longer short stories for an earlier time of a person's life, middle age, and then later on in life, but unrelated like the stories in her book, but just to kind of explore, certain situations that, that are kind of unique to growing up, or not necessarily growing up, but living as a gay person within those, lifetimes, I guess. So that's what I'm
Oh,
working
that
on.
sounds really interesting. I
Yeah.
can't wait to see that.
Yeah. And I have another short story collection that is pretty much done, but I'm trying to put the finishing touches on it. And I'm going to start shopping that around to a few publishers as well. So fingers crossed that, that gets picked up. So, but
That's
yeah,
good news.
always working on something. So,
That's good. I've got to get on that.
some days are better than others, though. I'll tell you. It's not like every day there are certain days I'll write like one sentence, or not even that. I'll just get maybe like some brainstorming ideas written down. And then there are days when I'll write 4 or 5 pages. So I don't have a set thing where I'm like, I must write 5,000 words a day or I'm a failure. I'm very anxious enough as it is. So that would be terrifying for me. So
I totally get it. Yeah, I'm luckily our editor in chief is a young person, young in comparison to me. She's wonderful with all the media and all this other stuff. I would lose my mind. It makes me so anxious. I'm just
yes,
not good with it. I'm ADD. It's just one more thing for me to kind of keep track of that I have no ability to keep track of.
I feel
Like I'm
that.
thinking
Yeah.
I'm sending people emails. I'm not sending emails. I'm sending them from the wrong account. I mean, it's just insane.
Yes, the company I work for, actually, it's a technology company, and I just process invoices for them. But it's the fact of the matter, it's a technology company, and I'm terrible. And they get all of these, the majority of the people that work there, I swear, they pull right out of college. So the average age is like 24 to 26, even younger. But so I'm of the older contingent, in the company. But it's confusing to me. So every day they'll introduce something new, and I'm like, can we just not do this? I don't understand. Because it's something else to have to learn, and I'm like, so
I'm
I feel that.
full.
Right, exactly. There's only
I'm
so much left
full.
up here for technology. Please, yeah,
Exactly. Well, that's our old rant today.
yes.
Add a word. Jarrod, it has been so nice speaking with you. This has been wonderful. I love your writing. I hope you continue. I can't wait to read what you have coming out. And I do appreciate you coming and speaking with us today.
I appreciate you guys taking the time. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. So
Have a great one.
you as well. Thank you guys very much. Have a good rest of your
Thank
day.
you. You too.